In my practice, helping people overcome insomnia and long-term sleep problems, I often get asked about sleep stages. So in today's video, we're really going to cover the 5 different sleep stages that you go through within your nights of sleep. And we're going to actually break them down into different parts, and I will talk to you about them in more of a practical perspective. I know that there is a lot of different articles online about the really scientific part of sleep stages, but often we don't actually really talk about the practicalities of them and how you can really help your body to go through them in a more natural way. So in today's video, just that word of warning, we are going to approach them from a more of a practical perspective. So this is more of an introduction rather than a complete and full explanation of each and every single one of them. But I'm sure that you will find that that practical perspective actually interesting as well. Now, before we go into breaking each one of these sleep stages down, I wanted to obviously welcome you to this video. Welcome back if you're returning. Thank you so much for your continuous support. And those of you who don't actually know who I am, let me introduce myself. So my name is Beatrix Schmidt. I'm a sleep coach, a professional speaker, and the creator of the Sleep Skills for Life program, which is very much my methodology, my way of helping people to overcome long-term sleep problems and insomnia as well. Now that we've covered that, I also wanted to tell you why in my work I focus on more of the practical perspective. Every single day when I speak to clients or people who inquire about sort of overcoming their sleep problems, I get asked about sort of how to transfer the knowledge, the science people know about sleep or sleep problems into the practicalities of creating great quality sleep. And this is very much where I focus my work on. Just because you're educated about sleep, it doesn't mean that you can actually transfer it into great quality sleep consistently. And this is why even today's video, we're really going to look at not just the science bit, but actually those practical parts of each sleep stage. But of course, if you are interested in this topic of sleep, overcoming insomnia and overcoming sleep problems, I would invite you to, if you haven't yet, subscribe to my channel, hit that little bell so that I can let you know when I post new videos. And of course, if you like this video, at the end of the video, hit that little like button below as well. So let's go into discussing all the 5 different sleep stages and how they differ from each other and what are the practicalities of each one of them. Now, a bit of a word of warning. In this video, we are actually going to be looking at a healthy person's sleep dynamic and sleep stages. So it's important not to jump into conclusions. And if you do struggle with long-term sleep problems, insomnia, or maybe other sort of sleep disorders as well, it's really important to actually go and seek an assessment, because just watching through this video might not give you that intelligence and the practicalities, the full-on practicalities to really overcome the sleep challenges that you have. And comparing a healthy person's sleep and sleep dynamics is not really going to be as beneficial if you have various different sleep challenges already existing. Okay, so the other couple of things I wanted to cover before we really break down the 5 stages is that, number one, the duration of sleep varies from person to person, and it varies from night to night. So not every night is exactly the same. Even I, who sleep really well, there are changes in my sleep depending on what I've got going on during the day, or depending even sometimes the season. So again, it's good to bear that in mind, that sleep duration changes not just from person to person, but night from night as well. Now also, when it comes to this combination of sleep stages and how you go through the different sleep stages, also varies from person to person, and it does vary from night to night as well. So as you can see, sleep and sleep stages are a much more fluid way of going through our sleep in the entire night, rather than a sort of a perfect piece of 1 + 1 = 2. You know, when we look at this fluidity with sleep and getting the skill sets, the practical sleep skills that I talk about in place, that means you're actually able to support your body to go through each of these sleep stages and those transitions between the sleep stages in a very good and positive way. When we look at all the 5 different sleep stages, we actually divide them into 2 main type of sleep, and you might have heard of these already, but let's just walk through them in this video. So one of the main sleep stages is what we call non-rapid eye movement sleep, and these are sleep stages 1, 2, 3 and 4. 3 and 4 being the more deeper ones, or we call them as deep sleep. But again, what's important is we spend 70 to 80% of our entire night sleep in the variation of these different sleep stages. So it's not that just one is better than the other. It's actually, you have to go through most of these sleep stages to create a great quality sleep overall. And then the second main type of sleep stage, which you probably have already heard about, is what we call REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep. And we spend about 20 to 25% of our entire night sleep in REM sleep. Now, one of the misconceptions I often have to talk about with clients is that people think that not waking up at all is what makes sleep great. But actually, it's completely normal to spend about 5% of your entire night's sleep more in this arousal or waking part. That means that in between the sleep stages, as you transition, depending on what the combination is, you might actually wake up a little bit, but it does not mean that it ruins your entire night's sleep. So don't think of them as abnormal. Normally, where we have sleep problems, the length of these are too long, and we're not really transitioning into a new sleep stage, but you're ending up waking up too much. So that's probably the most practical way to describe it without going into the nitty-gritty of the full science of it. Now, the other thing I wanted to share with you is we enter sleep through the non-REM stages of sleep. So again, sometimes I get asked about sort of how quickly and how which sleep stage we should be going into. Again, it varies from person to person, but we do enter sleep, and falling asleep is not a switch, it's a transition. It's going through different sleep stages as the sleep gets deeper and deeper and deeper. So again, that's a practical way to think about it, rather than think, right, if I'm out in a few seconds, that's better. Sometimes actually that's not actually better. And then the other information I wanted to share with you is sleep cycles. So sleep cycle means that we go through the variation of the sleep stages to create a full-on cycle between the non-REM sleep and the REM sleep. The earlier part of the night, generally these sleep cycles are 70 to 100 minutes long. Again, various different combination. And then later in the night, they are more sort of the 90 to 120 minutes long. And again, see, there are variation here. So it's important to not sort of nitpick which one you want to sort of focus on, but allow the body to create them in a natural way, as it normally creates all these different sleep stages, the way that they are designed to be created. So it's not something we can really completely be in charge of. And often when people get sort of stressed about these sleep stages or overly focused on these sleep stages, it actually creates lack of relaxation, which means that you might not be getting great quality sleep because you're almost overanalyzing it too much. So again, I hope that gives you that bit of a practical perspective on the variation of sleep stages, and also these sleep cycles that we refer to. Now, what we're going to do next is we're really going to break down each sleep stage. And again, I'm going to give you a bit of the science and then a bit of the practicalities on each one of those sleep stages. Sleep stage number 1 is the first non-rapid eye movement sleep stage that I wanted to talk to you about. So we spend about 2 to 5% of our sleep, our entire night sleep, in sleep stage number 1 in the various different cycles of sleep. We have the lowest arousal threshold here. What does that mean in a practical term? That means it's most easy to wake up from sleep stage number 1, just because this is the beginning of that transition and the body is more able to, or more susceptible to, actually really waking up from it. Also, the first sleep stage at the very first part of the night is normally about 1 to 7 minutes. So again, this is where initially you are wanting to get to sleep, the first part of your night. And then the fourth bit that I wanted to talk about here, which is more of this practicality, what we see when you have a very disrupted sleep, or you have trouble falling asleep, is, or even waking up in the middle of the night, is you're most likely going to have a higher percentage of stage 1 sleep compared to someone else who's able to maybe fall asleep in an easier way and not wake up so many times. But again, important not to self-diagnose. So in my practice, I don't actually really look at sleep stages in a very scientific way, but I look at the tendencies of what happens, what shows up, what are those practicalities that shows up, rather than knowing exactly how many minutes you spend in what sleep stage. When you learn to actually help your body to transition and relax and transition between these sleep stages, that means your sleep quality becomes better. So we don't always need to know exactly what the percentages are in your sleep stages to be able to really overcome a sleep problem. Stage 2 is the second type of non-rapid eye movement sleep stage that we go through, and it follows on from sleep stage 1. So it's not like you can just kind of jump into sleep stage 2 and cut out the first one. So again, it's important to understand the flow of how sleep is created. Now in sleep stage 2, we spend about 45 to 55% of our entire night, depending on those different sleep cycles you go through. And the arousal threshold that I mentioned earlier starts to change. So in sleep stage 2, it's now harder to wake up from it. It doesn't mean you can't, it just means that your sleep starts to what we call deepen, meaning that you're not as easily able to be woken up from it. You can, but it's not as easy. Then the other thing that happens in sleep stage 2 is your slow wave sleep is starting to increase. And again, this is why it's important not to think, well, you can just pick which sleep stage you're going into what time, is because it's more of a transitional nature. So in sleep stage 2, the slow wave sleep starts to increase up until the point where scientifically it meets the criteria for stage 3. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk to you about in this sleep stage is the first stage within the first cycle of your sleep is about 10 to 20 minutes long. So as you can see, it's a longer part compared to stage 1. And again, as your body starts to create and transition into new sleep stages, this will vary from sleep cycle to sleep cycle as well. But the first part is about 10 to 20 minutes. Stage 3 is the third non-rapid eye movement sleep stage. Now in this sleep stage, what we start to see is, as I mentioned in sleep stage 2, the slow wave sleep increases. But we only spend about 3 to 5% of our entire night's sleep across the entire sleep cycles in this type of sleep. It just basically means that as things progress through your nighttime, sleep stage number 3 is quite a short part of your entire night's sleep. And obviously in this sleep stage, it's even harder to wake up from it. So again, it's not impossible, but the arousal threshold changes again, and it's harder to actually be woken up from this actual sleep stage. And the other bit about this sleep stage is that it's actually only a few minutes in the first sleep cycle, in the first part of your night. Again, it varies from different cycles, but it's more of a shorter part of your sleep when we look at all the different parts of your sleep across the entire night and across the different stages. And this is one of the first sleep stages that we would call sort of deep sleep. So again, stage 3 and then stage 4 that I'll talk about in a minute are what we would consider sort of the deep sleep part of our entire night. Now, it does not mean that you have to spend a lot of time in these sleep stages to create really deep sleep. Every single sleep stage has its role to create the depthness of sleep and the quality of the sleep in a person. So it's important not to get sort of hung up about it a bit too much, which is what I heard from clients a lot of the time. They often get really stressed about, well, what if I don't spend enough time in in the deeper parts of sleep. It does not mean that your sleep cannot be improved and that it's completely insufficient. So again, it depends on where you are with your sleep problems and what kind of sleep problems you have. Stage 4 is the fourth non-rapid eye movement sleep stage. And again, this is the second sleep stage following on from sleep stage number 3 that's considered deep sleep, mainly because the slow wave sleep increased even more from stage 3. But we only spend about 10 to 15% of our entire night's sleep in this. And that's very important to bear in mind. A lot of the times people have this misconception that if they can just spend time in deep sleep, then that's going to make their across the night sleep better. Each and every sleep stage has its role. And in this sleep stage, obviously, is the least likely you are going to be woken up. So arousal threshold again changes. And you spend about 20 to 40 minutes in this sleep stage at the very first part of your night, the first stage of your sleep. Now, one of the things that I really want you to think about here as a practical perspective is every single sleep stage in the non-rapid eye movement stages are important. They transition you from one to the other, to the other, to the other, to be able to create that natural flow of depthness. It's not like you can cut out half of them and just straight go into the fourth sleep stage, let's say. And this is again why I always say to people, whilst it's good to get to know your sleep, but it's important to get to know your sleep from a practical perspective, rather than really over-analyzing how many minutes you spend in what sleep stages and how they differ across the night. When you're sleeping, you're not really exactly in charge of what's happening. Your body is naturally creating it because that's how your body is really designed to be in charge of your sleep. If you're conscious about it, that means you're not able to go through the sleep stages. So I hope that sort of clarifies it from the practical perspective when we look at all these different non-rapid eye movement sleep stages. And finally, we come to REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement sleep, and this is the fifth sleep stage across our entire night. We spend about 20 to 25% of our entire night's sleep in REM sleep, and we have about 4 to 6 episodes. So REM sleep doesn't just happen in one go. It will be part of some of your sleep cycles across your entire night. So this is where we could see 4 to 6 different sort of chunks of REM sleep across an entire night. One of the most sort of common things people know about REM sleep is this is also a sleep stage which is associated with dreaming. But it doesn't mean that you may or may not remember your dreams. So sometimes people say to me that, you know, they never remember their dream and they think that makes their sleep less good, but it doesn't mean that. It could just mean that as you transitioned out of REM sleep, you weren't able to remember what the dreams were like at the time of your REM sleep. But it doesn't mean that they don't happen. So this is again one of the things that I clear up with clients. But also, it's okay either way. If you're able to create really good quality sleep, then it doesn't really matter whether or not you remember your dreams or not. That basically means that you wake up refreshed, recharged, and able to face the day with very good energy levels. Now, another thing with REM sleep is this is where the brain is activated and your body is what we call paralyzed. So this is where your body isn't going to be moving, but actually your brain activity is much higher. So again, this is a practical way to describe what REM sleep is about and why obviously it's a quite different type of sleep stage. Now that we've gone through all the 5 different types of sleep stages that you go through each and every night, what I wanted to ask you is not to jump into conclusions about perhaps either overanalyzing your sleep or relying on data that might not be very accurate. Now, more and more I come across clients who have been using sleep trackers to start to figure out what their sleep is like. Sleep trackers have been improving. They're definitely better than they were a number of years ago. But when you have sleep problems and potentially even insomnia or other sleep disorders, sleep trackers are not going to be able to give you the depthness of the sleep stages and what the dynamics of those sleep stages are. Often the sleep trackers give you more superficial information. So it's really important to seek that assessment and actually have a sleep study if your sleep problems have been serious and long-term and you haven't really been able to address them through just natural behavioral changes and so on. Even if I see that a client is not really able to shift their sleep through some of the things that we work with, I would go and refer them to or send them to having a sleep study, a proper sleep study. And basically the reason for this is when you have sleep trackers, you either wear them on your wrist, or some of the sleep trackers you actually put your phone under your pillow. I think they've more recently been shifting towards wearable devices on your wrist, but there's still other ones out there. I don't know every single one of them. But when you're wearing a device on your wrist, it does not necessarily and accurately measure or able to measure what your mind is doing, what your brain activities are. So again, this is why, while the trackers might give you some really good foundational information, it might not give you the depthness of the information that you might need. And the other thing I also see with clients is that trackers don't necessarily transfer the information to you in a practical way for you to know what to do about it. And a very common example is when somebody has been wearing their device and actually maybe watching TV on a sofa, but the device has actually sort of put that asleep, and the person knew that they weren't sleeping. So this is why it's important to not to jump into conclusion about what you might see through some of these wearable devices that give you guidance on your sleep. So I really hope that this video has helped you to maybe untangle some of those misconceptions that I mentioned. I come across many different types of things in my practice that have been picked up through sort of articles and online advice, but it's important to look at the practicality of it rather than just the pure science and you not knowing how to transfer that science into the practicality. So if you like this video, hit that like button below. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, hit the subscribe button and hit that little bell as well so I can let you know when I post new videos. And come over to the comment box and let me know maybe which one piece of information was sort of new to you or interesting to you, or what you kind of taken away from all these different sort of sleep stages and this video. I always like to hear from you and hear what you have learned from me. And obviously if you've got any questions, you're very welcome to pop it down in the comment box as well. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you in the next one.